So we are moving on to session 2, traditional ecological knowledge and continuity in landscape practice. And our next presenter is Taisaku Komeie of Kyoto University. And the title of his presentation is Understanding Changing Roles of Plants in Sweden Landscapes, Cultivation, Forestry, and Ecological Succession in Early Modern Japan.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let's start. Oh,
Okay, looks good.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good evening, I should say. My name is Taisaku Komeie, historical geographer, studying Japanese mountain areas with a special interest in yakihata, or Sweden agriculture, also known as slash and burn cultivation, as mentioned in the first presentation by Ikeya-san. Today, I would like to present a case study concerning the changing roles of plants in Sweden landscape in the key mountains, the southern highland of Kansai region, Japan, in the early modern period. This case study includes materials from my 2 books published in 2022 and 2019. The central question in this case study is how early modern farmers in the key mountains used, changed, and controlled the plant ecology of the region through Sweden cultivation. The slashing and burning of the forest areas helped create open spaces on which secondary vegetation with subsistence and commercial value was created. How the cultivator influenced ecological succession and came to be agroforesters will be illustrated. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Here is a global view of the key mountains. The mountain mass is not very high. The highest altitude is 1915 around here, where its landform is very steep due to the tectonic movement and the torrential erosion caused by the plural climate. However, temperate and humid climates have broad area green cover, which in natural conditions without human intervention mainly consists of evergreen broad-leaved trees. Yeah. The vegetation of the key mountains has a complicated history influenced by human agency. Here are 2 contrasting photos taken from the same point, Edo district in Kawakami village in Nara prefecture. The left one shows the typical present-day landscape that is a result of extensive sugi or Japanese cedar cultivation from the 18th century onward. On the other hand, the right one shows relatively natural vegetation, including evergreen broad-leaved trees. The drastic difference between the 2 landscapes show how hundreds of years of anthropogenic activities have altered ecology of the region. This is a restriction land cover based on topographical maps dating back to the late 19th century. Mid-19th century, there's artificial changes in vegetation. Human impact is clearly seen bush or grassland and pine forest here and here in relatively low areas surrounding the key mountains. The afforested areas is spread out in the upper regions of major rivers, here and around here, while the Swidden area was very small and restricted in this time. However, gathering known cases of early modern land surveys and medieval manor documents that recorded Swidden fields, we can understand that slash and burn farming was prevalent not only in remote mountainous areas, but also around the lower parts of the highland or around the highlands. Based on
sorry, can you use the presentation mode that one of the audience said that your letters are too small? If you can make the full screen mode. Right now, seeing the actual PowerPoint screen.
Which screen do you see? Full screen or screen with a text?
Yeah, we are looking at your PowerPoint, not the full screen mode.
That's not bad. How about this?
You're still looking at your PowerPoint screen. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Can you see the pointer?
Yes, now I can see.
Okay, let's start again. Based on the comparison with 19th century land cover mentioned above, we can suggest that Sweden agriculture was one of the most important economic activities that changed the natural vegetation to a secondary one. The next question is how the population used the secondary vegetation, with special reference to two cases of early modern villages, Shiraya and Ido, are red colored in the map, in the upper region of the Kinokawa River, one of the earliest areas in which plantation forestry developed. Sweden feed product produced not only millet during the cultivation period, but also edible wild plants, grass for thatched roofs, and trees for fuel during the fallow period. An interesting case of early modern Shiraya village, currently Shiraya district in Kawakami village, Nara prefecture, is discussed here. The district has an archive including a village map that record the landscape of mountainous territories. This village map of 1677 shows the Sweden land surrounding the settlement, as well as bush, grassland, and forest in outer mountain areas. The prices of these land use are covered plotted on Google Maps. Most of the mountain areas were iriaichi, or commons, controlled by the village. I suppose commons in Japan will focus in the following presentation by Professor McKean. One of the grassland, Nobori-Oyama around here, was a topic of dispute with the neighboring village of Takigi. Several documents from the late 19th century recorded that Shiraya village allowed Takigi village to create sweeting field in the grassland. Later in early 18th century, Takigi villagers tried to plant Japanese cedar there. The planting of cedar trees in Swedenland caused friction between two villages, which indicated the plants that should be grown during the fallow period was very important for Shiraya villagers. This is a petition submitted to a local office of the Tokugawa shogunate in 1715. It showed interesting fact about grassland of Nobori-Oyama from the viewpoint of agroecology. The petition opposed trial of cedar afforestation by Takigi village. It says, in my interpretation, Shiraya village had 23 plots of land for Sweden agriculture in the grassland, which were rented to Taki village. However, they were allowed to use not all plots, but only 3 of them as arable land field at the same time. The Taki people were able to slash and burn 1 plot every year and used it for 3 years. Each plot was left fallow and used by the Shiraya people for 20 years. So this is very complicated fact, but in my presentation, it is showed in like this table. Shifting plots 1 by 1 every year, as shown in table, 3 plots were constantly allocated for Sweden agriculture, and the other 20 plots were used by Shiraya villagers. The vegetation of the latter went through ecological succession from open land to grassland and bush, and finally woodland. The document states that Shiraya villagers used these fallow plots to gather roof of kuzu vine and warabi bracken, which helped produce starch, and to gather kaya grass for thatched roof, and to make charcoal. The case of Shiraya village showed that the Sweden agriculture not only facilitated millet production, but also helped grow useful secondary vegetation. In other words, Shiraya villagers semi-domesticated the vegetation, expecting growth of specific useful plants after burning its previous green cover. This is why Shiraya village allowed Sweden agriculture by neighboring villages, but objected to the planting of cedar there. Understanding Sweden agriculture as a combination of crop cultivation and semi-domestication, we can suppose that a more efficient way of land use would be introduce new plants artificially in the fallow period. The case of Ido, one of the neighboring villages of Shiraya, illustrates a different kind of relationship between Sweden land and plants. The land register of Ido in 1679 recorded Sweden lands, some of which were planted with tea trees, lacca trees, and paper mulberry. They are especially registered because they are commercial valued. As shown in the preceding presentation by Ikeya-san, we can suppose these trees were planted after or within the Sweden cultivation, making them an important part of the fallow vegetations. Okay, plotting field in the land register in 1679 on Google Maps illustrates the landscape of Sweden area adjacent to the settlement and surrounding Sweden field. Probably woodland and grasslands surrounding the outer areas. Similar to the case of Shiraya mentioned above, we can suppose that the deliberate burning of vegetation led to a natural growth of a variety of useful plants. In addition, the secondary vegetation include artificially introduced plants such as tea trees, lacca trees, and paper mulberries. These plants played an important role in the succession from Sweden land to woodland. The beginning of the plantation forestry in the 18th century is easy to understand in the context of the efficient use of fallow period. Planting cedar was another new option for the fallow period. Like Shiraya village, Ido village accepted neighboring villages using their Sweden field, mainly in the outer area in the territory, shown in the small s. However, unlike in Shiraya case, Ido village allowed the afforestation of cedar by making a new renting rule for the fallow period in the early 18th centuries. The map of debated Swidden land in Edo village and related document in 1715 provides information about a cedar planting trial by a neighboring village called named Hitoji in the least Swidden land. The planting was accepted under the condition of payment of 10% of the selling price of land at the time of tree felling. This means that Edo village allows the fallow land to be planted with cedar in exchange for profit from timber. The map illustrates some villagers in Edo also had plots around the Hitoji land, some of which were Swidden field, but another were planted with cedar. Here we can find the beginning of the cedar plantation forestry in Swidden land, what we should say agroforestry. It should be added here that this is caused by the increasing demand for lumber due to population explosion and depletion of natural coniferous forests in the 17th century Japan, mainly Western Japan. The afforestation of cedar made mountain villagers rethink about how to control the commons. In Edo village, Swidden land belonged to the cultivated temporarily during cultivation. As shown in the patched paper with cultivator's name on the land register of Edo. The areas during the fallow period were not owned personally, but were village commons. However, afforestation with the cedar led to the land being occupied for at least 15 years. As the tree grew, the area became a pure forest of cedar, which could not be used by other people and for other purposes, such as gathering plants or making charcoal. Therefore, we should pay attention to the significant influence of afforestation on diversity of plants in and land ownership of commons. The village record book of Edo started in 1708 with a description of rules about how to treat Swidden lands, especially land on which cedar was planted by neighboring villagers. It records amounts of land rent received by Edo village for Swidden agriculture and afforestation. This suggests that cedar afforestation affected not only the plant cultivation system, but also management of its commons. By the end of the early modern period, most of the mountain territory of Edo village has gradually been divided into personally owned lands, where the combination of Swidden agriculture and afforestation was repeated. The modern land registration map of Edo illustrated many small lots of mountain space surrounding the settlement, which originated in early modern Swidden agriculture and agroforestry. Okay, I will conclude remarks shortly. In early modern Japan, Swidden agriculture facilitated growth of secondary vegetation, including useful plants. In the 17th century, farmers also grew useful trees in Swidden fields, which influenced the ecological succession in the region. Such practices provide an important context for the introduction of plantation forestry of Japanese cedar in the early 18th century. However, afforestation decreased plant diversity during the fallow period, and new local rules had to be established to control the use of Swidden fields or commons. This suggests that villagers try to control mountain fields socially as well as ecologically. Okay, thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, but there's one question, if you can answer this quickly. This is from Binaya. Since Japan is prone to disasters, Was there any sporadic precaution which take into account, such as landslide risk, while practicing Swidden cultivation? Or it was kind of a big problem then?
Now I'm checking the country.
焼き畑と災害の関係について。焼き畑をすることによって、例えば土砂崩れとかが起こりやすくなるとか起こりにくくなるとか、そういったような関連はどうなんでしょうか。
I think that could be happened especially in 17th century, and when the population explosion had happened. Tokugawa shogunate showed several times to prohibit Sweden agriculture in mountainous region. That in order to stop disasters in rivers. But I think this rules was not real power in the mountainous regions.
It is my understanding that it's not only slash and burn, it's a types of plants, types of trees that are there. I think recently one of the problems is that because of the loss of biodiversity and the loss of deciduous trees, which tend to have deeper roots, when the typhoon hit part of Japan, the mudslide and landslide is becoming more problem compared to some of the historical records. But certainly this is something that we need to think more. We've got one more question, but I think we need to move on to the next presentation.